Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
Hello, listeners. I'm Bela Musits, co-host of the Top Business Leaders podcast, where we feature CEOs, entrepreneurs, and top leaders in the business world. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help B2B businesses cultivate and reach their dream relationships and connect with more clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships to get return on investment through Done For You podcast. If you have a B2B business and want to build a great relationships, there is no better way than to profile the people and companies that you admire on your podcast. To learn more, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25media.com. Today's guest on the podcast is Sandeep Chennakeshu. He has spent 34 years in 3 industries whose products have transformed all of our lives. He has led teams across 14 countries that pioneered amazing products in wireless mobile technology, mobile satellite technology, semiconductors for consumer, automotive, and medical electronics, and safety critical software for cars, medical equipment, nuclear power plants, high-speed rail, and industrial robots. Along the way, he transformed companies to grow profitably in a sustained manner using the principles he has outlined in his book titled, Your Company is Your Castle. Welcome to the podcast, Sandeep.
Thank you very much, Bela.
Yeah, so let's dive right into your book. Can you give me the elevator pitch for the book?
Yes. I wrote the book mainly for people aspiring to grow into leadership positions, either fresh out of school or in management positions or their first management position in companies. And it really encompasses a holistic view of how to build a company comprising all the elements, structural elements, in order to make it last. And the title comes from the fact that I looked at a medieval castle and said, how do they last 500 years and have withstood nature's harsh elements and invaders? And a company likewise must withstand macroeconomic factors, pandemics and other things like that, as well as hordes of competitors. And so I stitched together these elements and provide it's not a philosophy book. It's more about here's the problem, here's how you think about it, and here are possible recipes or a framework to solve each aspect of the company in an interrelated manner. And I finally end with how not only should you know how to build a company, how do you build yourself to run a company?
Yes. So is this targeted to early career folks, mid-career folks, later career?
It's interesting. I sent the book out for review to a number of people. So I sent it out to pretty well-known business school professors. I've sent it out to CEOs. I've sent it out to mid-level managers, all through at different disciplines at different levels. And all of them found that there was something very new to learn from these experiences across the various industries. So I believe it is useful to people at all levels in a company and in all disciplines in a company.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. So tell me a little bit about how you sort of developed these key principles. What was the inspiration? I'd like to peel that onion back a little bit more. Yeah.
It's a great question. For over 30 years, I literally had no time because I only have one gear. And my wife makes fun of me. She says, all my engineering friends say I'm a series wound motor, which means without a load, it runs to destruction. But essentially, when I got some free time, I said I wanted to write the book. And I thought, why? And what am I going to write about? I had lots of ideas. And then I went back and said, why not write about my own experience? And very early in my career, I got promoted to being a general manager. And I was technical and operationally probably astute according to management, but I was clueless about business. Okay. And I made tons of mistakes. But every stumbling block became a stepping stone for success. And I said, what if I write about that journey and what I learned so that I can then teach people about my experience about building a business and how I built myself. And hopefully the takeaway for them would be not to have the same pitfalls and traps that I went down. And so that was really the genesis for saying, hey, why don't you do this? And then with the help of many editors who gave me constructive feedback, I started adding more and more to round out the core theme.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. So, I always think one of the challenges, and you brought this up when you talked about, I thought the analogy of countries was sort of interesting and civilizations. Sustaining a business, like sustaining a culture or sustaining a civilization, is a challenge because the world is always changing. Some forces get stronger, other forces get weaker, and you have to be very dynamic. So what are some of the challenges that you see, particularly given how business is today, that I think are absolutely critical for leaders to master?
Yeah, actually, again, a very insightful question. And, when I worked in a variety of different businesses, some that are more oriented to technology, some that are more service oriented, some that are more production oriented, some that are hardware, some software, some startups. And I've consulted for a number of companies in the world too. And, there's a very interesting statistic. 2/3 of all companies, and this is cited in Forbes, 2/3 of all companies fail within 10 years for a variety of factors, because companies that are started by very clever people with very clever ideas, why do they fail? Okay. And I think the real reason my belief is they fail because a lot of them opt for speed over systematic structure. You don't have to be bureaucratic. You don't have to have overweight of process, but you have to build it in a systematic, structural manner where you have interlocking elements. Like if you don't have a good foundation on a castle, the castle cannot be built to be tall and strong. You need to have a wall that wraps around the castle to prevent invaders from coming in. The wall has to be protected by protective towers, so people don't mine under it or scale it or break it. And then in the center, you have the keep. And the keep is where the people lived. And you have to have a roof over them. And all of these elements need to work together in order to keep the castle standing. Likewise, there are 8 elements in a company that need to be built that interlock and reinforce each other. Otherwise, the company is not likely to last and withstand both macroeconomic factors as well as invaders or competitors.
Yeah. Of those 8 elements, is there one in particular that companies tend to overlook?
I think that I would say that in my experience, everyone has a different experience. And I think that the 2 most important things in a company to make it succeed is to have a compelling strategy. But strategy tells you what you need to get done. However, culture determines what you get done. And if culture and strategy are not aligned, invariably you have a disaster. It's like having a great, great strategy that you want to get somewhere, but everyone's not aligned to get you there.
Yeah, understand. So are there warning signs that tell me that my strategy and my culture are not aligned?
Yes, I mean, very simple. I use some very simple metrics. So when I get into a company and I say, look, let me see if the culture and the strategy are aligned, I break down the strategy into a plan. And I have milestones. And I ask everyone to work towards just the first milestone, because when you're running a marathon, you don't worry about the finish. You first have to get through the first mile. So you get to the first milepost and you say, okay, how did we do against it? And you say that, okay, you had 10 things to do, you did 2. So maybe it's a bad start. So you then start talking to everyone and saying, okay, now we got milestone 2, let's see if we can improve it. Now, if your score again is 2, you know something is fundamentally wrong. Is it that people are not accountable? Our roles and responsibilities not clear? Our objectives not clear? Why is it that we are not able to keep our commitments? After all, we've taken money from investors and we've got to return it. So what is the reason for the irresponsible behavior in not being accountable? And that is something that I think very early on you could find out if the culture and the strategy are aligned. Excellent. It also could be, it could be a simple thing that maybe you have the right attitude, you want to get there, but you don't have the capability, which is an equally, big failing.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think that one of the most challenging things for leadership is to modify or change the culture, right? You come into an organization and it has a culture. Maybe that culture was set up a particular way on purpose, or sometimes it just evolved to what it is. And as a leader, you may say, you know what, we need to move our culture. We need to take our culture and make it more collaborative, or we need to take it and make it more technically savvy, or whatever the metrics are. Do you have some tips and observations on how to sort of change culture?
Absolutely, because in at least 3 businesses that I was asked to transform or help because they were in trouble financially, the talent was very high.
Yeah.
And it's not always that the employees are not doing the right thing. It's how they're aligned to do what the company wants. And the most important thing in my mind is to bring awareness. So it's extremely important for the leader to walk around and talk to employees, ensure that they all understand what the priorities are. And I used to do this by a number of 3 different techniques. The first is I used to have town halls. And in these town halls, I would basically talk about the company, very simple objectives, and always present to the employees, how did we do against what we said we would do since the last town hall? It was my scorecard about me, not them. Okay, because me as the leader, I had to show that I was doing what the company needed. And then I would actually, a marketing leader of mine had a brilliant idea. They said, hey, why don't we go to customers and ask them whether we can videotape them and ask them some simple questions. Make it a small clip for less than 5 minutes. And employees, I used to play these video clips, and it was very interesting. In one interview, a big CTO of a company told us that we were the most brilliant group of engineers he'd met, but he lost his bonus for the year because he trusted us.
Mm-hmm.
And that one video was worth more than anything I could have said in 100 meetings, because the employees got it straight from their customer. Okay, so it brought awareness that they were doing something wrong. The second thing I used to do is I would basically have a couple of meetings every month with people selected. Anyone who had a birthday that month came to have breakfast with me. So I'd have this big meeting where all get a little bit of breakfast, and we'd sit around a table, and it was ask me anything, but be brutally honest. They could ask me any question in the world, personal, anything. And I would just tell them exactly the truth. And this was to build trust. I would always start off with a little joke or something to basically liven up the meeting and get someone to talk, and then we'd exchange ideas. By doing that, I got to understand in an unvarnished way what were their challenges, which helped me also then work on that with my talent leader, HR leader, how to fix these things. The third area is that I wrote a newsletter every month. I wrote the first page on what we wanted to do or achieve in the next phase or the next month. And then the next page would be written by my head of sales, and the next page would be written by my head of engineering. So the employees every month got 5 pages of articles of everything that happened in the company, what everyone's thinking, what was everyone doing, and what progress had they made. And so the employees felt that the leaders were equally invested in reporting what they did rather than just reviewing what the employees did. And that established a really trustful relationship where we could then have discussions about how to change things that would move our company forward.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. So I think one of the big challenges in organizations is figuring out what the proper metrics are for measuring performance. Because oftentimes when you measure something, you end up getting some unintended consequences because the employees are reacting to that measurement, and they may be doing something else that is making that measurement look good, but maybe being detrimental to some other aspect. So how do you think about various different metrics, and how do you sort of come up with them, and how do you sort of fine tune them?
Again, an excellent question, because these are all goes to the heart of execution. And so I always start with an annual operating plan. So if it's 2023, I start building the annual operating plan in August of the previous year. And I say, what are we going to achieve in 2023? What are my financial objectives? What are the objectives to increase the value of the company? Why will people want to work with us? So you set the annual operating plan, and that is approved by the board of directors. Then I take that plan and I break it down into concrete, achievable targets for each department. And that's broken into goals. Okay? All of this is then these goals, in order to achieve them, I basically start designing diagnostic metrics. You want your metrics not to be thermometers. You want them to be thermostats. Because a diagnostic metric is one that tells you something is going wrong, go fix it before it goes completely wrong. You don't want to know after the fact that something went wrong.
Yeah.
And a simple example is everyone knows me for my delivery accuracy metric. And this delivery accuracy metric measures what every employee delivers into a project. And it's measured. There are hundreds of these little things, and you total them all up. And I came up with a simple rule that if 95% of them were not on time, it's near impossible for the project to be on time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I measure it, I start seeing that things are going off track. And I can say, wow, that's a diagnostic metric. So I got to pull it in before things go completely off track and you have to move mountains before you can actually fix it. So the key is and my book talks about some of these diagnostic metrics.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, there's established companies that, have existing employees, maybe several hundred of them are doing 50, 60, 100 million in business. And then there's startup companies. How are the challenges between those two different types of companies different?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, we know that they're slightly different challenges. An established company that has revenue and a functional profit and loss statement has to basically look and saying two things. I like to look at it as, one is they've got to look at what I call operating leverage. That means for every dollar that they bring in, how much of that flows to the bottom line? If they are more efficient, more of it will go to the bottom line. Okay. If they're less efficient, less of it comes down. Now, that, of course, depends on what product you're selling also. So established companies must learn how to basically grow their revenue and their operating leverage. And that's their challenge. A startup is a little different. Startups have to first produce a viable product, then establish go-to-market and sales channels and sell the product, support the product, make revenue, and it takes a few years.
Yeah.
And so for the startup, it's extremely important for them to focus on how are they going to get a marketable product to the market and make money. Okay, so it's and that's the fundamental difference. And many startups, what they try to do is they do a lot of very cool technical things. And I come from the technology area, but they forget all the other things that are needed to sell the product. Okay, so it's not a balanced structure in many cases.
Yeah.
And when you try to do all of that, you run out of money. So for a startup, the biggest challenge is how do they manage, how can they be fiscally prudent to achieve what they want to achieve with the money they have? Because investors won't trust them if they just burn all the money they have and have nothing to show.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about customers a little bit and sort of finding customers. 25, 30 years ago, if you were a B2B business, you'd go to a trade show, or maybe you go to 2 or 3 trade shows a year, and that's where you'd find most of your customers. These days, there's so many different outlets. Trade shows are still there, but there's social media, there's internet advertising, there's just so many different channels. As you build your strategy for a business, how do you think about how I'm going to obtain new customers?
And that really depends upon your product. In most of the businesses that I worked in, all my products were what I call high touch.
Mm-hmm.
A low touch business is one where you can go and look up the product in a catalog on the web and read all about it and make your purchase, or at least then talk to a sales guy.
Yeah.
In a high touch product, there's a lot more of personal touch where your sales and your marketing people and your product people have to be with the customer, and they have to establish, right, that the product is solving a need for the customer. Okay, and so a lot of my questioning of the strategy is not just how good and cool the product is, but how are you going to sell it? And why will the customer buy it? What problem is it solving for them? If you can't answer that, and it's part of this whole strategy, I have a more simple model in strategy called ORCA, ORCA. O stands for opportunity. Obviously, you want to go after big opportunities. R stands for relevance. Is your product relevant to the market? Is it meeting an unmet need of a customer that brings great value? What's its relevance? If others are providing it, you're not going to get in, especially if they're entrenched.
Yes.
And the CA in ORCA stands for capability. How are your capabilities aligned to deliver to that promise? Right? And if you can't figure that out, I don't think anything else matters, because you will not be able to get customers and convince them that you have the relevance to them and their needs, as well as the capability to deliver to them. Because if they invest in you, they may be making a very big bet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a result, they don't want to fail.
Yeah. So how do you, I understand what you just said. What I'm trying to understand a little bit better is, how do you find those customers? How do you know which doors to go knock on, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think that is part of your go-to-market strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to basically look at the market and say, okay, these customers, it's very difficult for me to directly address them, and it's better that distributors address them. You could say another group can be by partners. Another group of customers can be addressed by partners, right? And there are some customers that you need to address yourself, which is the high-touch approach. Okay, so it depends. When you look at your customers, if you try to do everything for everyone, you'll get terribly diluted, especially if you're a startup, because you don't have the resources.
Yeah.
And customers need that attention and focus because they have a lot of questions. And especially if you're the new kid on the block, you have to make sure you answer that thoroughly and have their attention. So the part of the go-to-market strategy is to find out how to get a sales force multiplier through the various channels and leverage how you support them.
Yeah. Excellent. Do you have some sort of turning points in your career where something happened that sort of, really gave you some terrific insight into some of these things that you've written about?
Yeah, I think, oddly enough, I'm 65. When I look back, I've had this phenomenal journey. And I started off in 84. I had this, I read an article when I was sitting in Canada about mobile phones, and I wanted to go work in it. And everyone told me, you're crazy. People are predicting that there'll only be a million devices by 2000.
Yeah.
And by the way, the ones that they're building in the 80s are big and bulky, and you strap them on people's backs. Well, I'm glad I went and did a PhD in it. And it was good because I took that risk, and I got a great job. I did research for a few years. And as you and I spoke earlier, I was a GE corporate research in Schenectady. And our group got bought out by Ericsson, and I became head of research and for mobile phones. And I researched products, and I realized one day the products I was writing all these algorithms for and doing simulations, I didn't know how to build them. And I said, gosh, what am I doing? So even though I was a vaunted researcher and respected, I said, the first opportunity I got to go build products, I put my hand up and they said, okay, let's try you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was out of my comfort zone. And I went overnight from being a very respected expert to being the runt in the litter. Nobody listened to me. It's a major mindset. But it taught me that if I studied and I dissected products and I talked to experts and I put in the hours, I could learn to build products. And once I did that, once I was able to overcome that barrier, and especially, Bertrand Russell has a great quote. He says that conquering fear is the first step to wisdom. So once I was able to conquer the fear, I was actually able to learn more. And so I then started rotating in different departments of the company. And that is how I got promoted to being a general manager. So a few years later, I said, now that I know how to build products and run a company, why don't I learn how to go and fix a broken company, not a stable company? And that was a different challenge. So what I've done throughout my life is to volunteer for things I've never done before, and to learn on the job and from the school of hard knocks how you do things.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Let's talk about people a little bit. How do you think about, what are the important elements in hiring new employees? What do you look for?
Yeah. So obviously you look for competence, but, I look at two other things. Always in an interview, I try to find out what the person knows and not what they don't know. A lot of people want to find out what they don't know. I think that's wrong. You got to find out what they know. So I first try to find out what is their competence. Can I use that competence in my company? But more importantly, I'm looking at their attitude. What sort of attitude do they have to solve a problem? So I give them some examples and say, just walk me through how you do this.
Yeah.
Like, can they collaborate with others? Can they take feedback? How do they go about solving a problem? And I'm a big believer that if you have, you have to basically have that ability to work with others, and bolster your own ability with that collective ability to bring an impact. And usually I kind of stress, I add more value to attitude than competence.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. I think I agree with you 100% on that. Absolutely. So if there's someone listening to this that's, maybe in the early stages of their career, do you have some words of advice or, top 3 tips to sort of think about as someone is embarking on the early part of their career?
Yeah, it again depends on, if they want to rise in their career. I've actually written an article in CEO World about 7 beliefs that I have. I tell them to my children, I tell them to my mentees, I tell them to everyone. Now, everyone's beliefs are personal. everyone's career journey is also personal. So I basically, what I basically tell them is, the first thing is dream with conviction. Okay, if you have a dream and believe in it, go do it. Okay. The second thing is, I said, regularly leave your comfort zone. Just like I mentioned my own career, I kept switching to basically learn more, because at some point you plateau and you don't learn very much more.
Yeah.
The third is, I said, reflect on success and failure. Most of us are elated by our successes, and we get depressed with our failures, at least for some time, or it just gives you, it's a gut punch. But what can you learn from it? What can you basically take away and say, how can you basically do something different? And it's harder to do that than, basically celebrating success. I also believe that dealing with adversity, you get disappointed when you're not picked for a job. There are so many ways of getting disappointed. How do you deal with it? That's what builds character, right? You either have to deal with it, you walk away from it, but never let it swallow you. I talk about a story in my book, and I tell a professor friend of mine from RPI actually told me that I was very disappointed at some point in my life that something didn't happen. And he said, Sandeep, look, you're a guy with a lot of sandwiches on your plate. And if you had one sandwich and somebody took that away from you, you should be angry. But if you have a lot of sandwiches, if somebody took away one sandwich, why are you upset? Yeah. I took that to mean that, life will present you with a lot of opportunities. Go chase them. Don't dwell on the past. Then I always tell my mentees, go get battle tested. If I love playing cricket. And I said, no practice in the nets meant anything. You're really tested on the field with a formidable opponent, right? With the ball coming at you at 80 miles an hour. What are you going to do? It's a test of talent, technique, and temperament. Yeah. So just like that, on the job, you basically have to prove that you can deliver. Okay. And the last two things are, I say, be curious. Every day, learn something new. Jot down the little things you don't know. As Lord Thomas Dewar said, right? The mind is a parachute. It only functions when open. And, right. And lastly, stay true. Nobody will believe in yourself more than you will. So believe in yourself, do the things you like, and walk your talk.
Yeah, very nice. Excellent points. Great way to start wrapping this up. If people want to find out more about you and your book, where's the best place for them to go?
So my book is on Amazon. And if you go to Amazon and you type out my full name, Sandeep Chennakeshu, it's right there. And you get it in both the Kindle version as well as or you can use the Kindle app on every other device, or you can get a hardcover book. And then I have a website. It's www. Sandeep Chennakeshu, one word, my first name and my last name.com. That's my website. And you also can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We will make sure all of that information is in the show notes so people can find you and find your book. Is there something that I have not asked you that you'd like to share with our listeners before we sign off here?
No, I think you've covered almost everything. And it was very nice talking to you, Bella. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to share my thoughts. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And Sandeep, thank you for being a wonderful guest. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I certainly learned a lot. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Bella. Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.